boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of LendAPI Partner Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Billy Quinn. I haven't met him in real life, and this is the first time I'm meeting him as well, just like everybody else on my pod. Maybe some of you guys already know Billy, but welcome back. This is we're mid-May now, 2026. The year flew by. With everything that's going around us, it'll be good to have somebody that's in the community, in the banking sector, to talk us about what is top of their minds. So, Billy, welcome to the pod.
Yes.
Maybe just to take a few minutes talk about who you are and why you're this pod and anything else you want to talk about. Let's roll with this.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Tim. Long time listener, first time caller. Appreciate everything that you're doing out there in the industry. And so when the opportunity presented itself, definitely hopped on it. So again, thanks for having me. But for those who don't know me, which is probably most of everyone listening to this, Billy Quinn, currently at Truist, where I lead the product and platform architecture, very much a business architecture function for how we deliver product through platform experiences at the bank. It is a industry-wide type concept, but we're really trying to fine-tune this to make it something that really resonates with both front, middle, back office, as well as with our clients, both external and internal. But where did I start? Started, as a kid who thought he was going to play professional baseball. That didn't happen. Played through college, then kicked the tires in the military for about 10 years and transitioned over to Accenture, then to Wells, and here I am with Truist. Currently live in Kansas City. Have 4 daughters. We originally from Chapel Hill, so you see a little bit of Carolina blue here, royal blue now too, for one of the alternate Royals jerseys. My wife's originally from KC. We've been coming out here for over 20 years, and we just kind of fell in love with the place. So here we are.
Yeah, I've been out of KC multiple times. I heard that you guys have a pretty good football program over there.
Yes.
Anyways, I got 4 kids too, man. Billy, that's a lot of kids. 4
It's a
girls. My God, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Just give me the ranges. Single digits to double digits. What are we
Yeah,
talking about here?
just the double digits. So 15, 13, about to be 10, and then 7. So we're in it. As a recovering process engineer, it was pretty good. Happy path, 4 girls, didn't have to really change anything, but there's always some differences that you have to navigate. But I love it. Have it any other way.
Lots of hand-me-downs, I'm sure. I got 4 as well, Billy. I got 2 girls, 2 boys.
There you go.
They're 17, 15, 12, 9, right up in there, man. We're right there. So that's another episode. And my wife and I both studied engineering, process, industrial, computer science, and all that stuff. And we feel like we got it down pat, but every day there's something new.
Yeah, Murphy's Law will determine if you have it down pat or not. And maybe we should just pivot to like a focus on the family podcast, since we
that's a
a lot of life
whole
experiences here, and rebrand yourself.
whole other podcasts and episodes. But my chief of staff, Eric King, he served in the Army for 4
Okay.
years. Right between his college career, I just had a conversation with him on the way to a fintech conference,
hmm
and he told me that he did a couple of years of college and went to Army for a couple of years, more than a couple of years, and appreciate all y'all service. And he came back to college and finished up.
Yep.
10 years, that's a career in any book.
hmm
What'd you learn from that?
Yeah. 10 years, it was a career, and so there was definitely a little bit of a kind of a grievance when I had to leave because so much went into it. But honestly, it was like, hey, I did what I wanted to do, and did my time, and it just wasn't conducive for the family anymore. But what did I learn? Oh gosh, I would say that everything that I've done in practice has been kind of a output of what I've learned in the military. And there's a reason why there's structure, why there's discipline, And it's not just to make you robots, which is what a lot of people like think. It's to get you to that
Mm.
solid foundation that it's like then you as a human can go execute and on top of that foundation. And that's what's really grained into you. And that's what I've kind of carried over forward. Um, you know, uh, the buy with and through concept really stuck with me, and that's what I've
Mm.
really seen to be a positive impact from how I've and other people have approached work in this industry. Is like it has to be buy with and through. You need to work yourself out of a job. No, no silos, no feudal societies. That doesn't
Right.
work. You have to go out there, get in the open, expose yourself, and empower people. So that those are the biggest takeaways. And again, man, I could use the rest of this time to go through specific instances, but
Sure.
I always joke
Uh,
kind of that the military is one of the world's oldest product organizations, as well as with some
mm.
pretty solid change management. So
Right.
carrying that over into the financial services industry.
Right. Yeah. Um, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, numbers of years ago, I come out of high school, I wanted to join the Navy, and things didn't happen that way.
Mhm.
End up going to college. So I always had a fascination about military, and it's a gigantic universe. Microcosm has all of the things that you see in society, civilian society, heightened right in these organizations. But Accenture, um, do they have a program that seeked out military veterans? I know there's a lot of really good organizations really pick out,
Yeah.
veterans because they have that not just discipline, but that process mindset. Tell me more about that experience at Accenture.
Yeah, so I'll take a step back again into the military where it's like the recruiter lied to me saying that, oh, you're going to be
Oh,
super marketable when you go into the army and like everybody's
uh,
going to want you in the civilian world. And so after the first deployment, I was like, I think it's time to go. And nobody could translate what I did in the military
mm,
into how that would work into the private sector. And that was around 2014, 2015. And there has been immense strides in this military to civilian transition program, Honor Foundation to name one, American Corporate Partners, just folks that really get it. But I had a hard time. Like I couldn't even get a call back to be a bank teller or like an
wow.
assistant
Huh.
manager at Dick's Sporting Goods. But
Mm.
fast forward a few more years, the industry kind of continued to evolve and how to help people transition from the military. So took a few classes there to understand how to become more of honestly like a person. It's like,
Right.
hey, you're not this rank and structure thing that you did in the military. You're actually a person, and you need to translate that because Timothy Lee has no idea what you mean when you said you
Mm.
did all of these military, lingo things. So you
Sure.
had to translate that. And at the time, Accenture already had a pretty successful military transition program. It was called the JMO program, Junior Military Officer, which it looked at specific ranks and grades within the military and put them into that management consulting world. And oftentimes when people hear the word officer, they just think of like, oh, you're the officers. Well, no, there's non-commissioned officers as well. So Accenture did a really good job at recognizing, there's commissioned officers, which are your like captains, lieutenants, majors, and then your NCOs, your non-commissioned officers, as well as warrant officers. And those are your real tactical folks that you want to really get things done and are the
Got
SMEs.
it.
Had an opportunity to interview with them, go through a cohort, and started in May of 2019. And they were like, "Hey, you were in the military, right? So we're going to put you in the public sector because uh, the public sector folks really give us a hard time, and you can take it because you were in the military." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, that works a little bit."
All right.
But eventually, quickly had the opportunity based off of a lot of that structural background, process engineering into the financial services sector, where was able to do some really great stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, Accenture, great program, and it's still going strong today, as well as many other industries. Not
Yeah.
only, not only just consulting, but other industries have those transition programs.
Right.
So I would say, hire a vet, but hire the right vet, because I think that is one of the things that kind of watered down and helped or kind of limited the transition piece. Is it was very
Mm,
much kind of a bumper sticker campaign at the beginning of kind of the global war on terrorism. It's like, oh, bring all these veterans in to help your companies do work, and that just didn't work really well.
mm,
Um, so, veteran is a label, or a military service member is a broad label, but there's also specific criterias,
right,
as you would be hiring a product leader, it's the same thing. You need to look at the right military veteran skill set, people skills,
right,
all that stuff. So,
right. I think what's seared in the American populace memory is Lieutenant Dan and Forrest, right? They had completely different military careers, but when they came out to the civilian world, with
mhm.
or without help, they took on different paths on its own. But you're still paying it forward. Talk
Mhm.
to us about the honor society you mentioned earlier,
Yeah, the Honor Foundation. So that's
the honor foundation.
really, yeah, that's one of those really niche, specialized groups that help mostly special operation veterans transition into the civilian world, whether they, were direct soft members or folks that supported it. That's a real niche skill set. People who can really operate in the gray, adapt that
Mm,
by, with, and through concept. And so I've had the opportunity to coach around 6 or 7 fellows that have gone through those cohorts, and it's just great individuals, and they've all really gone on to bigger and better things post
wow.
military, and it's a phenomenal program. And again, there's so many other ones, but really it's just doing this, taking the time to talk shop, be very candid with kind of
Mm,
what the real world is like, and say, hey,
mm,
here's this is what the recruiter didn't tell you, in whatever
mm,
civilian transition workforce program you're working through, and that's where the real value is just
right.
getting nitty and gritty with folks, and being open to let them know what to expect, because you're helping them plan.
Wow. And well, we appreciate your service. We appreciate you, you know, uh, paying it forward with all the veterans. So thank you on
Yep.
behalf of all the audience here. Um, let's go back to that Accenture. Is that where you sort of saw some financial services activities and eventually led to
Yes.
your second career in banking?
Yep. Yep.
Play that back for us a little bit. I'm
Yeah,
fascinated.
so with Accenture, there was an opportunity to get on a financial services engagement where we really needed to look at what is it you really do here? That old office space thing. And when
Right.
you're a bank, you really need to know, what do you do here? And if there's any
Right.
gaps, that's where the regulators come in and expose, either proactively or reactively, if there's been some type of incident.
Right.
So, carrying a lot of those military principles before, and in the Army, we had something called the Mission Essential Task List. It's a medal. And what that does is, all the way from the tippy top, this is what the Army does, all the way down to the third man, third girl, third row, and say, this is how you contribute to that. So part of the experience with Accenture was just really stringing that together. So the bank knew who it was and was able to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, manage us from a regulator perspective as such. And as I was doing that, there was a real opportunity to say, well, this doesn't just need to be kind of like a one-time effort where it's static and you just kind of do this bank on a page. This is what we are.
Right.
There's an opportunity to move this into, well, use this for product delivery. Um, this is our baseline. This is our foundation.
Hmm.
We don't need to continue to do design and discovery sessions. Like, we've already
Hmm.
seen what we do, so start here. This is almost the map. And then bringing in those key people who understand it is how you move through and really apply that map to
Right.
get where you want to go. And that's kind of how I see myself now, is establishing that map and working with some great product coaches as those guides to get teams to operate in those foundational principles
Yeah.
of what you do. It's not
Yeah.
static. It's something that's living and breathing. Make the best of
Yeah.
it.
We work with a lot of startups and scale ups in the lending banking space. Um, a lot of people, I want to say, are doing it backwards, right? They saw the final product and
Yep.
they immediately started creating that, recreating it, right? And to a
Yep.
certain extent, these AI products are doing just that. They see the final product and trying to retroactively
Yeah.
recreate everything, which even I think of that as probably an amateur mistake. But going back to the process, what are some of the things that we as fintech startups should look out for, or some
Mhm.
of the common mistakes that we should avoid? A lot of people are trying to rush through these stages, right? Trying to get to the final product. But
Yeah.
give us a word of wisdom there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, there's so much that goes into that. I guess that's
Yeah,
why I have a job.
yeah,
But, there's a lot of industry standards out there. Buy-in is a great one. That is something that you can say, hey, I don't want to recreate the wheel. Let me go look at what the industry says I should be doing as a banking institution. From a process perspective, you have things like APQC. From an architecture, you have TOGAF and all these other industry standards, and they're great. They're a good starting point, but you still have to adopt that to who you are. You can't just
right,
say, "Hey, we're this industry standard," because oftentimes it doesn't cover the niches that you are as a bank.
hmm
That competitive differentiation of why someone comes to you. So there's still a little bit of work that you have to do. You can't just take something off the shelf and say, "We're this." And I
right,
think that's one of those shortfalls with the current AI environment is like, hey, we're going to be whatever this LLM tells us we're going to be. But it
right,
doesn't have kind of that, domain knowledge of who you really are to say, well,
right.
this is what you are. You
Yeah,
need to find a way to make that work together. And I think you establish that architecture that's driven by processes, that operationalize capabilities, that's where you're going to get successful. And also, from a fintech perspective, and when we say product, I know like,
hmm
product is a loose term, capability
right,
is a loose term, but from a banking perspective in fintech, for you, a product are these APIs that deliver against these business functions. However, for a bank, a product is a business consumable product, something that's on a general ledger that's reported on the 10K that clients are coming to, get and as they come in through your door, either through a branch or a mobile app or some other
yeah,
type of channel, they're not coming just because they like want to hang out or have an account. That it doesn't work like that. So start with the business product because that drives what you need, how you do it,
hmm
who's coming, and you have to get to a certain level where it stops being differentiated. Let's say from like a commercial real estate loan, CRE loan,
yeah,
broad, horizontal. Now, when you talk about, well, is that CRE loan owner occupied or is it for investment purposes only?
right,
And that's where like the processes and the capabilities
mm,
will start to differentiate and say, well, we have to do these business rules because it's an owner occupied. Well, if it's for investment purposes, it's going to need these things. And
right,
that's where from a fintech perspective, and a lot of people are doing it well. It's like, well, here's the API that has that differentiation already built in. Now, it may be industry standard, make sure your business process, or excuse me, you want to start with the business process, make sure that API truly reflects your business process, and then tweak it there. So now you can sleep better at night because your APIs are running off an accountable business process that you manage, you own. You are now in control of your destiny. You control that narrative. But back to where I said, business product from a fintech perspective, from a bank, that is what you do. Nail that. You got to
yeah.
make sure you can deliver that end to end.
I sometimes, just like you spend a lot of time helping veterans to adapt to the civilian world. I teach a couple of courses at a local university, and my students always ask me, Tim, I want to break into this, startup world, building some cool fintech products.
Mhm.
How do I start? And my common feedback is, go find the biggest bank you can get your hands on. Work there for 2, 3 years, because that's kind of what I did. Once you get in there, all sorts of stuff appears, and you may find your co-founder there that has the same aspiration to come out and fix this for the entire
Yeah.
industry. One, what's your feedback for my students? Two, does those opportunities still exist? Meaning that we got smart people like you, Billy, fixing everything in the bank. Is there
Yeah.
still stuff left to do for fintechs or
Oh,
startups to attack?
there is a long runway, and I think
Okay.
once the bigger banks have an idea of who they really are, that bank on a page, they can say, "Oh, is this something that we need to go get a commercial off the shelf product and go through the laborious infrastructure? Or is this something where we could do something quick with an API,
Mm,
microservice? And do we have the skill set to do that? If not, is there a fintech out there that provides that
mm,
opportunity? And one of those things that, I've really seen, uh, you know, present itself is that banking is so unique where it does these things black and white, has regulations it needs to execute against. So again, it's like start there. Don't
mm,
recreate the wheel. There are certain things that you have to do. And with that, we have a lot of drudgingly things within the bank that do that. Excel models that do probabilities of default. It's like,
right.
well, instead of going through a whole change management process for probability of default, like can you make that Excel into an API or a microservice, and
Right.
you really speed up the governance of that as well as how confident you are in that model being accurate, as
Mm,
well as you can now move that model where it's just mostly like a servicing thing. You're doing
right.
portfolio management. Is this person going to default? Well, why don't you move that to the front of the process and say, hey, this probability of default model can now do, score somebody really quick and just push them straight through to a product. Or there's a few things that didn't quite work out. So let's do a score plus with a few underwriting hands on and then the
Right.
full underwrite. So it's like,
Yeah.
you can shift these things back and forth. And that's just like such a small example of all the big
Right.
things across those legacy brick and mortar banks that the
Yeah.
fintechs can really look, understand, and then take that away and say, all right,
Yeah.
let me provide that experience that satisfies the most business products.
Yeah.
And that's where you win.
Right. I've heard and I've read that Truist is a product forward kind of a bank after merging and all that stuff, right? Let's talk about specifics, but how do you instill this culture of product process, the things that you've been preaching for the past 20 minutes into an organization of that size?
Yeah.
Do you have to have a CEO, or is it just a bunch of executives like you guys kind of voice? How do you build a culture around product and process?
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah.
tough. There's not a lot of folks that are really doing it, and that's where we have that executive buy-in to say we need to be product first and product first on both sides. Business consumable product focused, but then the
Right.
technology platforms that are managed as a product, that supports that. And one of the biggest things that those senior executives really need in order to get on that
Mm,
bandwagon and to help champion that is you have to quantify what you mean by product or what you mean by a platform. And that
right.
is through your business processes, that is through client experiences. So
Right.
really bringing that whole information environment together and saying this is how it works. You'll always hear like the spaghetti to lasagna. It's like, well, we need to get to a lasagna, and there's nothing
Right.
wrong with spaghetti. I mean, everybody eats spaghetti, but lasagna is a little bit better, a little bit tastier, as well as it lasts longer in the fridge. And go back
Sure.
to spaghetti 3 days later in the fridge, you're like, this isn't even like spaghetti anymore. Lasagna is just as good. So with that, it's like you need to be totally confident and quantify this. Where oftentimes we do a lot of qualitative. It's like, well, I want a product box because of this reason. It's like,
Mm,
why? Because eventually you need to have left and right limits that say this is your product. You support other things, and you're empowered to execute within that and support
right.
others. There's often been that um, level of quantification that has been bypassed. And, I've seen it kind of both ways. You can either have that forced on you in a consent order environment and say,
Right.
get all this stuff aligned,
Right.
or you can kind of control that narrative. And,
Right.
we're controlling that narrative right now within
Yeah.
Truist. I mean, we're not done yet. We're on the beginning of this journey, but
Yeah.
I think you're going to see it be a real competitive differentiator for us
Yeah.
as a product first bank,
Yeah.
as a frontier bank for that most.
Yeah. I am looking forward to that. We don't see a lot of Truist on this coast, but it's coming. I can feel it. I see your advertisement on TV, radio, print media, even on I think on airplanes sometimes.
We had a pretty big golf tournament that just wrapped up
Oh, that's right.
today. So
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
to say the least.
yeah,
Um, so people's shopping behavior, especially Gen Zs and post millennials, maybe alphas, they're gravitating towards these type of maybe mobile first banks and or these third party BNPL players.
yeah,
And we talk to a lot of credit unions and community banks as well, and they can see that people are borrowing or making payments elsewhere, and they have a hard time sort of grasping what do we do, how do we contain a situation if that's a problem to begin with. What are I mean, speaking in jest,
right.
generally speaking, people are shopping, playing, working, and that's where they're making all these financial decisions or spending decisions. How
Mhm.
do banks sort of catapult themselves all the way to that point of need or point of moment of truth, as I say
Yeah.
sometimes, to grab to sort of get that attention back to the banks for your customers and members.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to that business product,
Mm,
focus is those customers, they are coming to a bank because they have a financial need, not
right,
because they want a friend.
right,
However, there is still going to be that friend requirement with relation management needs for certain segments within the banking industry, which those
right,
segments translate right into people, real human beings that have certain needs that they're shopping for, that they're paying in one place and taken away from another in order to do
right,
that. So having a really solid client experience practice is so important, and then being able to then translate that client experience into the business product needs, into the capabilities required that
right,
technology delivers, that is supported by those business processes. That's where you have to really string it all the way through. And that's what we
right,
call, a platform experience, where like an old McKinsey article, not really that old, it was like
sure,
2020, but it's saying, a platform is something that strings together an experience all the way through. So when we say sales as a platform, it is all of those needs that a client would be required to both do, as well as a banker in order to offer to get a business product through that sales experience. And so build your platform, build your API, your microservices to reflect that true end-to-end sales experience, and then have it ready to hand off into that onboarding, origination, servicing, and
right,
just keep that loop going and have it be able to pivot based off of that business product and that client experience requirement. Oh, I want to do it mobile. Well, do you have the infrastructure to open a loan from mobile, or is it just
right,
deposit account openings? And if the JD Power in Greenwich says, oh, you need to do better at offering lending experiences via your mobile, you now know what to do. The buy now, pay later. I mean, again, I think there's certain things that are niches to certain players in the industry, where, from a true core banking aspect, it's still relationship driven. It is your bread and butter products, and you want to be available for the client no matter where it is, branch, online, client, embedded, whether they truly know it or not.
yeah, yeah. Um, we can turn this conversation to more of a macro environment where the inflation is everywhere. Cost of goods, consumable goods, gasoline, if you will, are going through the roof. Um, People can't move or don't want to move because of rates. As a bank, one of the biggest decisions that a consumer will make in the United States is probably buying that home to become a homeowner.
Yep.
Uh, what are you individually seeing out there? Um, God knows I get a message, phone call from my mother every other week. Oh, where should I put my money in? Just people are offering 4%, 3%. Is this even real?
Yeah.
How do you splice your brand through sometimes mass hysteria about, like what the feds are thinking, where the rates are going?
Right.
But I have a growing family. I got to move to a bigger home. How do we, how do you help the consumers to parse through that noise
Yeah.
uh, as
And
a
and
bank?
and that's where, the human in the loop aspect is not going to
Mm,
go anywhere, where, there still needs to be that empathetic banker, advisor who really knows your situation and can walk you through whatever it may be. Now, you can get a lot of that work done beforehand through some advanced logic, as you're shopping for products, but ultimately it's really going to be that brand experience for people. Oh, I see Truist, I trust them because they are partnered with these local communities, support these charities, are in the community from an athletic, perspective with the Braves, Orioles, but that brand is still huge, and that's still what people resonate with. We're very visual. If we see something, we're like, okay, I understand that Truist is, or whatever bank it may be, is someone that I can trust. So they really need to bank with their gut, not over that 0.25%. Because at the end of the day, that's not going to really be the thing that makes or breaks your situation. Is, are you confident that you can get the right decisions, either if it's through like a self-serve platform that a bank can provide, or can you call your RM and say, hey, need to have a candid conversation? And again, that's not going to go anywhere because we are humans. We desire a relationship, and there's nothing better than having someone that you trust to either affirm you or coach you up a little bit. And so that's what I would say. Trust the experts and what they're saying. From an industry perspective, put money here, invest in this, buy now, pay later, or pay later, buy now. But trust the industry, or excuse me, trust the brand, and do your homework on that. So.
Right. I mean, at this point of the podcast, if anybody are still listening, there's probably a good amount of young folks that wants to, probably work in banking, finance. That's what I tell people anyway, and probably want to, get into Truist. There's a lot of sort of quote unquote AI driven, I guess, layoffs and firing. You read between the lines. There's always other type of reasons why that's happening, over hiring, whatever it might be, COVID. What is a bank of your size looking at talent pipeline? Certainly, you probably have a bunch of people working for you, and a bunch of open positions. What can a young individual graduate with a variety of different degree or variety of different backgrounds try their hand into joining a bank, and where do you think their career ought to start?
Yeah, I mean,
If they choose the banking.
you got to start somewhere. So even if it's not like one of these fancy banks straight out the get-go, it's like go work at your local credit union. Start building that brand and that craft. Take as many courses as you can to specialize yourself so you are that subject matter expert, because it is a super competitive environment, and unfortunately companies aren't in a position to take a lot of risk when they hire folks. They need people to come in and be able to do that job exceptionally well as do all those other duties as assigned.
Sure.
Because a lot of things fall into that bucket. But also, work 2 levels up, 1 level down, and that takes time. I mean, I'm still working on that, both as an employee and as a person. So, so a lot of opportunities. Continue to put yourself out there. LinkedIn is a great tool just to be bold and go out there and say, hey, I think I can knock this out, and start relationships, because you're not going to have a lot of success just going to job boards and applying that way.
Right.
There's that human element that helps get you there. But also, you got to start somewhere, and don't get frustrated if it's not, day one, I'm working on the street, or with Truist, or with Citi, or First Citizens. You'll get there, and I'm a believer, and as you start the path, Romans 8:28, kind of all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So just, trust that, and keep executing, and you find yourself where you're supposed to be. So.
Right. A lot of people are, kind of jaded about these computer science, computer engineering degrees now. I know you have a really deep academic background as well, Billy. Should people study engineering, sciences, or focus on business or psychology?
I,
What do
I
we do
mean,
now?
we, and I say we loosely, it's mostly my wife. We homeschool, and so getting into that algebra and that
Mm,
deductive reasoning,
right,
I mean, I can now see how at the time it didn't make sense, how it translated into what we do today, where it's like you
right,
have to be able to think into third, fourth, fifth orders of effect. There has to be a reason why you're doing something, which kind of goes back to how do you quantify a product
right,
for organization? You
right.
have to be able to pretty much do that algebraic expression to prove it out. But yeah, absolutely. You continue to pursue those degrees because those are hard
Mm,
skills. You still
yeah,
need people to, uh, you know, do correct prompts, like even from an AI perspective.
right.
Like, for what takes me like 2 weeks to get a prompt right in the deliverable, folks that are going through the schools like can probably knock that out in about 20 minutes. So,
Yeah.
that book knowledge is absolutely key, but there's also that quick turnaround where it's like, well, we'll put it into practice. And so
Right.
you're looking at schools, what are
Right.
schools that provide opportunities for internships and where you
Mm,
can put a lot of this into practice instead of just, taking an online
right.
course and being like, I
Right.
know this stuff now. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't know it until you're in front of a person and they have a deliverable that they're expecting you
Yeah.
to bring about, and that's a whole different world. So,
Yeah. Sometimes, algebra and deductive reasoning doesn't work, for somebody that's starting the career 3, 4, 5 years into that role,
yeah,
trying to do a bigger project, get promoted, and you walk into a room, do a presentation you prepare for 2, 3 weeks, maybe a month, and somebody raise the red card, say, "Oh, it's not going to work,"
yeah.
for whatever, personal reasons or, fiefdom, like you mentioned earlier. How do we manage through that? That kind of turns people off on one side, but you got to go through that battle scar
Oh,
to get there.
yeah, you absolutely have to, and that's where you have to be a professional in your craft and
Okay.
know it cold. And if if you were wrong or if you didn't know it, like say it. So like going back to the algebra perspective, it's like, oh, I was supposed to, you know, multiply the exponents, not add them, and
Right.
it's like,
Or didn't consider a variable, right?
or didn't consider a
Yeah.
variable, and that's where you're just like, if you were wrong, thank you,
Mm,
you're right. I didn't consider the variable.
right.
However, if you were right, and it's not so much about being right or wrong, it's like how do you coach and explain it without going into, some algebraic,
Debate, right?
debate
Yeah.
or whatever, and just say this is why it's that, and that's why I'm confident it is this, and we can continue to work together to make sure that that's accurate. But
Yeah.
there's weight behind what I'm saying, and oftentimes, not only just in this industry, just in general, we just say things, and that's that whole
Yeah.
qualitative thing. It's like, oh, it may sound good, but will it pass the test when the lettuce and tomatoes start coming at it?
Mm,
And
right.
that's where it's like build yourself and get yourself ready for that. Schooling prepares you, but
Right.
you got to get into that real world. And
Right.
some people are lucky and able to start school right into that real world at a high level or at a higher institution. But if not, you now have a different path to get to where you're eventually going to go anyway, and take advantage of that. You'll be a
Right.
lot more confident in those meetings when somebody raises their hand.
Right. Yeah, I say this probably offends people, but you got to grow some hair on your chest, and that just takes these battles, right, to get tested.
Mhm.
Um, my God, I mean, let's go back to baseball for a second. We're actually
Yeah.
interviewing a gentleman that graduating from Oklahoma State University, baseball all the way, and it did sales in this field to collect sensor data, right, for these athletes that are training in these camps and
Mhm.
all that stuff, right? Fascinating game. We heard military analogy, Accenture analogy. Give us some hot takes on baseball and why that is important. My son plays a little bit of that, but I'll
Yeah.
leave it to the expert to say a few words on baseball and
Yeah.
life.
So I guess probably from the baseball perspective, that gentleman, if he was in sales, he's used to striking out. Where they say,
Mm,
baseball is the only profession where if you're successful 3 out of 10 times, you can be a Hall of Famer.
Right.
So it's just like, hey, I got thick skin.
I love it.
If you get those 3 out of the 10, especially from a sales perspective, you're awesome. It's definitely not that easy, but I think that's where it instills like, hey, you are going to fail a lot. And I think that's just sports in general.
Right.
Um, but with baseball, there's a little bit more of a wild card there. I mean,
Mm.
you have split seconds to react to a pitch. Balls can go which way or the other based off of hitting a rock in the
Right.
infield. Your dad could be yelling at you while you're in the on deck
Yeah.
circle. You're just like, but that's again just like how you mentioned with the military as a microcosm for the real world. I mean, I think sports in general, same thing. You got to work together, but if you haven't put in the time, you're
Hmm.
you're not going to get 3 out of 10 times of success. It's going to be
Right.
1 out of 10, and if it's 2 out of 10, you're lucky. And
Right.
there's some inward reflection where you're like, oh, maybe I didn't put in the work to be
Right.
successful. So I'm not going to throw a temper tantrum in the dugout because I expected to hit 5 home runs. It's like, well, did you put in the work? And even if you did put
Hmm.
in the work, it's a more failure than success sport. But hey, you can hang your hat on putting in the due diligence and
Hmm.
you can do.
Yeah. So, like we look at other societies in different parts of the world, right? Some of the society champions teamwork, group work, right? You're the company, right? Um, for what it's worth, I think in the Western world, in the United States, sometimes we coach kids sort of win at all cost, winner takes all.
Mhm.
You got to be the champion. We're the champion. But when you get into larger organizations, right, there's moments for individuals to shine. But
Mhm.
what do we need to do to coach, you know, um, good players, right? Of course, champions, but how do we how do we think about this bifurcations of, you got to win, you're the number one, there's no sum zero game,
Yeah.
versus you got to take, on these projects, Billy, probably 20, 30, maybe hundreds of people involved
Yeah.
launching a platform or product.
Yeah.
How do we think about this bifurcated
Yeah.
education?
I mean, for that, capital's market advisor, it is win at all cost, and they are the profession, and you need to take that into consideration when you are building those platform experiences based off of the product that they're selling that has a specific client experience and requirements. So it can't just be, backwards, forwards. It has to be that by, with, and through model. And if you're getting a lot of heavy feedback from people with those type of personalities, like that's part of it, and that's why you are in a successful bank like Truist, because there are RMs out there who win at all costs, and they have done some great deals that isn't just like a Truist thing, and it has now supported that community through a business having more resources to support their clients. That again, trickles out and through. So it's really you got to take all of it and don't stop, and that's where like product work is great. It's not like, yeah, you have these little toll gates, we could talk
Right.
about waterfall and all those other things, but it's all just perpetual, and you just got to keep moving and just digesting everything at the same time and dropping things when it's bad and holding on to things when it's good, and it's tough. It's not easy, but going back to that foundational piece, you have a product and platform architecture that is backed up by roles,
Mm.
responsibilities, processes, boundaries. You're going to be a little bit more successful in, understanding what you're delivering, as well as limiting some of that noise, where it just helps you be confident in that craft. But everyone gets a say. But if you have a product and platform architecture that say, increases or decreases based off of if it's quantified or not.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and from like the Western world perspective, I don't think there's a true appreciation for how different we are, in the Western construct to how
Yeah.
the rest of the world operates. And that was just one of those great lessons learned from the military, is just being able to experience different cultures. where WASTA works and where WASTA doesn't. You know, WASTA is like, oh, I have this big warehouse with all this stuff. I'm never going to use it, but it makes me feel important. Like that's a cultural thing, and you have to learn how to work through that. And you're probably not going to change that, but how can you best leverage it? So it'd be the same thing with that RM or group of people who are dead set on this thing needs to happen. It's like everything's always about compromise, but also like just understanding who you're working with, why you're delivering it, and also take some inward reflection based off of some of that feedback. I remember one
Right.
time um, I was working with a gentleman overseas, and he was like, Billy, I have a question. Why do Americans have a different car model every year? And I'm like, that's a really good question. And I don't have a good answer. Besides the fact that it keeps a lot of people employed and, it's too big to fail, all of those good things. But
Yeah.
if somebody questions that about a platform experience or why you do something, it's like,
Hmm.
well, think about it. And, there's sometimes, unfortunately, that answer is like, ah, too big to fail, kick the can down the road, don't have a good answer. We're just going to keep doing it. But
Yeah.
just be ready, be ready to answer that and be ready to think about it as well.
Yeah. Wow. I do this because I learn from all my podcast guests. Billy, thank you. So we talked about striking out to spaghetti. We talked about everything: family, God, structure, military, Accenture, big banks, fintechs, and how to build a product that solves issues and that whole journey to get to stardom. But thank you for coming on my podcast.
Absolutely.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think we're going to be friends for a long time because I think we see some of the stuff
Yeah.
through the same lens. But yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about this and love to have you come back maybe in a year to talk about what has changed and shifted.
Yeah,
But
would
for
love.
now, we have to say goodbye, Billy. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.